welcome everybody to our webinar today. So today's webinar is lessons from 2021 and some solutions for 2022. We just released our benchmark report a couple of weeks ago now, and Hugo is going to take us through what those information is, what you can learn from that, where it stands in your business versus other businesses. And we've got some very special guests today, but I might do an introduction, but first of all, I'll kick off with a welcome to country. I'd like to welcome everybody. I begin today by acknowledging the Camaragal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm on today. But in the spirit of reconciliation, as we're all joining today from different parts of the country, I'd also like to, on behalf of Restaurant and Catering, acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, their connections to land, sea and community, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people of today. So welcome everybody, lovely to see you all. Let me introduce you to the team. We've got some exciting panelists to join our discussion today. So we have Wes Lambert, CEO of Restaurant and Catering, who's joining us today to do a little bit of an overview of the country, where we're at, some information that Wes has come to hand on the last couple of weeks after the benchmark report's been released. We also have Hugo Robinson, head of our policy government team, who'll be taking us through the benchmark report and sharing his screen with some slides and information for you all to have today. And then we have three special guests. We have Jeremy from the Think Group, GM of Think Group. Jeremy has businesses, premium dining here in Sydney and Byron Bay, and also up in Brisbane. And then we have Christopher. Christopher is from fantastic SA. Haven't been to SA for a little while, and he's from Blanco Horner Hospitality Management. And then we have Caleb, and Caleb is from Caleb Restaurant and Bar over in WA and Subiaco, I believe. So welcome everybody. I might kick over to you, Wes, to be able to give us a little bit of an understanding of the state of the nation, where we're at, and any updates we should know.
Thanks, Belle, and we are very excited for Hugo to give his presentation, and we thank the panelists. I have dined at 2 of the 3 panelists' locations, and I cannot wait to get out to WA to enjoy Caleb's new rooftop, which I see on social media all the time. So thanks, everyone. As you know, we've released the 2021 industry benchmarking report, which we started in 2008. So we've been releasing those benchmarking reports every year for a long time. So certainly they have become a relevant resource for the industry. The information in this report was from fiscal year 21, so to 30 June last year. And a lot has happened since this report's data comes from. We polled many restaurants, cafes, caterers, and other hospitality businesses in September, October, and November to get this information. So certainly it has a lot of relevant information that would likely have lagged into the Delta outbreak, but it does not include any of the information in relation to what's going on in the hospitality industry in that December, January, and now tomorrow, February situation around the country. So a bit of information, as you know, hospitality has been the hardest hit industry during the pandemic, but also during the Omicron wave, which has been the biggest wave thus far in Australia. And Restaurant and Catering has still been fighting on behalf of the industry. We have lobbied for the South Australian government to release 2 iterations of its business support package. We've just announced yesterday, alongside the New South Wales government, their initial business support package for New South Wales. And we know that Victoria is going to be releasing their business support package likely this week, or if not on the weekend, to help the hospitality industry specifically, which again has been the hardest hit. When it comes to the workforce shortage, we understand that our segment of the industry has one of the largest workforce shortages in the country, with up to 100,000 jobs to get us to full employment. Now, for many of you, you may have thought that the 15 December return of working holiday makers, international students, and skilled migrants would have begun to solve the problem. But the problem is because of the Omicron wave, there are actually only an additional 2,000 working holiday makers that have entered the country since the 15th of December, bringing the total to 19,000. which was 46,000 a year ago. International students that were expected to return in February, there is a little bit of green shoots that some of them may return, but the bulk are expected to return in August. In addition, a bit of positive news is that we do expect that the international borders will be reopened to tourists from likely around Easter from some of the countries that we have agreements with for hotspot designation. Hopefully Australia's Omicron wave will have passed and we'll be able to open up to more countries. And restaurant and catering will continue to fight to get more people into the industry. We recently found out that at the end of 30 June this past year, that only 31% of trainees and apprenticeships that started finished. So 5 years ago, it was 51%. So we all have a lot to do to ensure that the reputation of hospitality gets back to its former self. And certainly those of you who are on this webinar and our panelists are doing just that. So without further ado, I will turn over to Hugo for his presentation.
And everybody, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them in the bottom in the Q&A box, and we might answer them live in the box, or we'll answer them chatting in the discussions as we go through today. So feel free to do that and to say hi to each other as well in the chat if you'd like to say hi. So Hugo, if you want to share your screen with your slides, and we'll kick off with the benchmark presentation.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yep, all good to go.
That's doable. Yep, there we go. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hugo Robinson, and I am the Manager of Policy and Government here at R&CA. And I want to thank and welcome all of you for tuning in to this very important webinar to discuss R&CA's 2021 benchmarking report. It feels like since this pandemic started that politicians and journalists have droned on and on about how that we can all finally see the light at the end of the tunnel that is this pandemic. Well, let me tell you that working in the space for 2 years now, it feels like it's been a bloody long tunnel. Last year was an absolute roller coaster, but you don't need me to tell you that. You were all in the thick of it. Whether it was the lockdowns of New South Wales, Victoria, the stresses of restrictions coming and going, vaccine mandates, staff shortages, inflationary pressures, customer anger, catching the virus itself, or living behind the Iron Curtain of the Republic of Western Australia, we've all had an incredibly tough year. Data collected from the 2021 benchmarking survey shows that for the last financial year, that many respondents met this year with some form of optimism going off the back of 2020, and that may be coming down to the fact that they felt that they knew what they were doing and knew what to expect this year. But they felt that easing restrictions would lead to better business. And of course, unfortunately, we will have to find out till next year what the true impacts of Omicron were. But it really seemed like this was the time that people felt as if they were coming out of this tunnel. The second key finding was that skill shortages continue to be the biggest problems facing the industry. And whilst business operators were less concerned about the lack of patrons coming in from overseas and interstate, the lack of workers entering Australia was absolutely devastating. And this indicates that whilst menu prices were actually going up and consumer demand was going up in different parts of the country, the ability to service this increase with staff left many operators struggling. The third key takeaway was that the reliance on takeaway during COVID-19 lockdowns had irreversibly changed the way that Australians purchased food and the way that operators sell it. The 2021 survey shows that whilst many businesses moved to delivery platforms and takeaway due to COVID-19 lockdowns initially, many are now seeing it as a permanent fixture to their revenue. And we can't discount the fact that takeaway is probably here to stay. This includes takeaway alcohol that for the first time in our industry was allowed to be served sometimes with a meal, sometimes without, but marks one of the largest and most significant reforms in Australian liquor laws in the past few decades. And the fourth key takeaway was that whilst food and occupancy costs had dropped slightly as a percentage of revenue from previous years, the cost of wages and keeping people employed had increased by the time that this survey had released itself, with an increase further expected for next year. In its 12th year, the benchmarking report provides a picture of what the industry is facing and helps us to inform decision-making on how to take on these challenges so that we can all come back roaring for next year.
Hey, Hugo.
The survey was open during September, October, and November in 2021 and contained 88 questions relating to the 2020-2021 financial year.
Hey, Hugo.
Yep.
Do you want to swap to the next slide?
Oh yeah, I've got it here, yeah.
Yeah.
So who am I? I have been working at R&CA for a few months now, since September 2021. I'm manager of policy and government, and I previously worked for federal politicians as an advisor and for the registered club industry in New South Wales. And who are you guys? So this year, the typical respondent to R&CA's 2021 benchmarking survey was a privately operated restaurant located either in the suburbs or regional Australia. They usually had about 10 or more years of experience in the hospitality sector and employed between 0 and 19 employees. 71% were family run, and the vast majority indicated that they only had one venue that they operated. In an interesting change from last year's survey, the majority of respondents indicated that their turnover had increased slightly, with 56.9% indicating that turnover was between $200,000 and $2 million from last year, with the second most popular size range being 2 to 5 million, with 18.4%. And these figures are interesting because they were slight increases to the previous year, indicating that there was a high level of consumer demand for takeaway food in jurisdictions that were still affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as a broader bounce back once the hospitalities were allowed to reopen, obviously before the Omicron variant came and did its thing. So saying that staff shortages were the biggest problem facing the industry is saying that the sky is blue. Unfortunately, with borders closed and wage hikes and the lack of interest from locals to enter the industry at this moment, the problem has plagued the industry for years, but it's only now become even more astronomical. 73% of respondents said it was harder to fill positions this financial year than before. This was an incredible increase from 2020's 46.1% of respondents who said the same thing. Businesses who indicated that they had vacancies that were required to be filled in the last 12 months were asked how easy or difficult it was to fill key positions. And chefs, like last year, were again the most difficult position to fill, with 51.7% of businesses indicating that it was very difficult to fill the chef position, which was an increase from last year's 33.8%. Just under half of businesses also reported that it was incredibly difficult to recruit cafe and restaurant managers to fill vacancies in their businesses. The easiest position was the kitchen hand, with 27.1%. So, unfortunately, with staff shortages, and I think part of the point of this presentation today is to sort of talk about solutions that the industry can sort of find to fix these astronomical issues, is that there is no silver bullet solution to this problem. Whilst we do have indications from the government and through various connections that Restaurant Catering does have with the government in terms of when borders will be reopening, and obviously we've had holiday makers and other visas coming back, we're still waiting until things come back to normalcy to see this increase in staff that we need. And I think one of the things that we should all be exploring is that we need to start working on getting better training and investing more in training to keep the staff that we already have. We've found that when we asked on roughly how much on a per monthly basis restaurants were paying for staff, on training, 38.8% indicated that they had spent less than $200 per month. And whilst we don't want anyone breaking the bank, obviously, for staff training, investing in these people's careers is a great way to make sure that they stay along for the journey and stay a bit longer. But obviously, as I said, we're working with the government to make sure that immigration comes back properly, and we have better ways of rewriting labour agreements, like the premium dining labour agreement that we've worked on with the Minister of Immigration, to make sure that more workers come in, better skilled workers come in, and that their pathways for permanent residency is shortened, as well as their English requirements, to make sure that we have a good stream of good workers coming into the country. So the next big issue was business costs and expenses. And as we can see, the food, beverage, and rent costs decreased as a percentage of revenue from previous years. And this indicates that people were putting up menu prices, and whether this is a mixture of things of basically inflationary pressures caused by supply chain problems, or the fact that there was just natural inflation in the economy at the time, we've seen that menu costs have gone up. And I think that this is really important, as per coming to the next slide, where we can see that what you can do about these business costs is that it's okay to raise menu prices. I think the second point that's really interesting is that that rents and property stuff actually decreased from last year. And it shows that negotiating harder with your landlord is actually the way to go, and that tenants currently have an unprecedented amount of power. And R&CA is in constant discussion with government to ensure that the current rent relief packages that were put in last year are at least extended to make sure that the cost of rent and the cost of you being on your site does not go out into humongous proportions.
So Hugo, are you saying that for many restaurants, even though their cost of produce and rents might have gone up in dollars, because they raised their menu prices, that 10 to 20% that we had been talking about for a couple of years, they actually lowered their percentage costs?
That's exactly right. And as you said, I mean, dollar costs may have gone up slightly, but as a percentage of their entire costs over the year, it actually went down. And that's due to a couple of factors. And I think one of them is offsetting it with menu prices going up, as I stated before. And some of it does come back to a sort of sluggish return for labour staff to come in. And I think that's part of the reason why wages and salaries only went up slightly from last year. And that's because basically the staff shortage crisis has decreased the pool of staff that's coming through. The next part I want to talk about is the worst kept secret, is that takeaway is now massively on the rise. And whilst traditional pickup and delivery still reign supreme, the third-party platforms like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and Menulog are still becoming more and more popular. Most businesses will continue to offer takeaway after the COVID-19 pandemic, indicating that it's become an incredibly important revenue stream for most businesses. And interestingly, respondents to the survey said that takeaway is now no longer about competing with other businesses that it has been before, but it's about meeting consumer demand. And that, by what I mean, is that just because the restaurant down the road from you is using Uber Eats doesn't mean that you necessarily will just to compete with them. But you know that the consumers now are looking forward to using takeaway more so than they are to come in. And I think that the other point that we'd like to make, as I said earlier, is that takeaway alcohol provided a much needed boost, with most businesses opting to continue to selling takeaway alcohol even after lockdowns, and will continue to do so after the pandemic ends. So what can you do about takeaway? So as we know, takeaway is here to stay, and some of the surveys that we've done outside of this survey indicates really that before the pandemic, takeaway accounted for 8% of all sales. It then went to 100% in most jurisdictions which had full lockdowns, obviously because no one could go out or you couldn't open up to dining service at all. But now that's settled back down to about 30%. And the really important thing about that is that it shows that consumer demand for takeaway has fell onto a position where people are more comfortable to be eating at home and drinking at home too. In most jurisdictions, takeaway alcohol was allowed to be sold alongside a meal or without a meal. Restaurant Catering Australia has worked incredibly hard to make sure that this is a permanent fixture of post-pandemic life. And we can already see that in New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland, the state governments have already agreed to keep takeaway alcohol in some way or another, mostly with a meal. And we're still working on talking with South Australia, West Australia, and the other territories to making sure that this remains a permanent fixture in the years to come. And as I said before, this indicates one of the largest changes in Australian liquor law reform in the past few decades. And we can see that now, it only makes sense that if we now have 30% of consumer demand going to takeaway, that we should be able to progress enough to make sure that we meet that shortfall that you'll get in dine-in. The next slide comes down to the changes of the Restaurant Industry Award in August 2021 and the Hospitality General Award. And the survey asked if restaurants had implemented any of the changes introduced. For both of the awards, less than half of the industry had made these changes for a variety of reasons. As part of ongoing efforts to help the restaurant cafe industry from recovering from the devastating impact of COVID-19, Restaurant Catering secured landmark changes to the Restaurant Industry Award designed to provide more flexibility and simplicity to businesses and staff operating under that award. The changes, which are optional for businesses to adopt, means that businesses can adopt all, some, or none of the measures depending on their individual business's circumstances. The three changes to the award are the introduction of an exemption rate for senior employees, simplified classification system, and the ability for employers to pay allowances via a set hourly rate rather than each instance that they are accrued. R&CA has set up a page on our website to help employers through adopting these changes through videos and free guides. And so finally, we come down to what R&CA is truly fighting for during this period. And I think that I can speak for the rest of the team in saying that we've been incredibly busy making sure that coming out of this pandemic and using this benchmarking report as a basis for our arguments with governments and with departments to make sure that the best possible outcomes for the hospitality industry are met, is that we're still fighting for more financial assistance and government support for businesses and employees. And we've seen currently that SA, New South Wales and Victoria have already taken up the fight and have agreed to some form of reform to help these businesses coming out of the pandemic. Solutions to staff shortage crisis through favourable immigration policies, working through training, working through rewriting awards and labour agreements to make it easier for people to come to this country and work in the industry. Fighting for businesses to minimise the impacts of mandatory vaccinations and rat testing for staff. The inclusion of hospitality in the critical work sector for relaxed rules in relation to self-isolation for close contacts so they can attend work when they are negative and asymptomatic. Extending unpaid pandemic leave so that employers are not forced to pay staff for isolating as close contacts, and fighting for takeaway alcohol laws to be made permanent. And so while none of this is really easy, and the benchmarking report does provide a snapshot in time from last year when things had just gone before the Omicron variant, we're hoping and we're expecting that through the work that R&CA does here, that we will be able to come out of this thing relatively unscathed. And obviously, all of our hearts go out to the businesses who unfortunately did not make it from last year. So I want to thank you all for tuning in for the webinar, and I'd like to hand it back over to Belle for our Q&A session. Thank you.
You're on mute, Belle.
The most common thing said in 2021. So if you haven't had a look at the benchmark report, you can download it and have a look off the website. Otherwise, you can contact us directly, and it's a bit of a book. It's 90 questions. It's a lot of graphs, a lot of information in there. So I guess today was a very top level snapshot, but I'd like to ask our guest today just a couple of questions. And I certainly think it's the most common question that I'm getting asked at the moment is, so we had these tough years behind us, now looking at 2022, how do you think how optimistic do you think that you are for your business, and how optimistic are you for 2022? And I might ask Jeremy, first of all, to answer that question.
Thank you, Belinda. We're extremely optimistic for 2022. I think that there's huge demand in the market. There's real energy from the diners, and with the borders still essentially closed and people not doing a lot of travel, there's still an enormous amount of money that's being spent within Australia, and especially in restaurants at that high end as well. I think that the last few years has really given us an opportunity to reflect and really analyze our own businesses and look at it from a completely different perspective, not only from a financial level, but from a creativity level and from a big picture. And I think that above and beyond the changes we've made in our own businesses, the industry has really got so much energy, and there are so many new restaurants coming down the line. Never seen so many new restaurants open in such a short period of time. Really interesting restaurants with new offerings and new financial models and new creativity from menus, from a general experience, which is really adding huge value to the bigger industry.
Jeremy,
Thank you.
Jeremy, it was a huge shock, actually. Last year, there were 48,000 restaurants, cafes, and caterers. And at the end of the financial year of this report, there were 55,000. So you're absolutely right. It is opening time for new businesses.
And that's added significantly to the staffing challenges that we have, but also it is adding a huge excitement and to the industry and to the especially for the diners.
No, thank you. Over there in WA, Caleb, I mean, how optimistic are businesses and you for 2022? What's the vibe in WA?
Right now in Western Australia, especially in the city of Perth, which my restaurant is located close to in Subiaco, there's a lot of new restaurants. When I newly moved to open a restaurant in Subiaco a few years ago, like before the pandemic, there were a lot of for lease, but nowadays it's hard to find a lease. A lot of people are opening because in Western Australia, there's more new infrastructures, there's more new buildings coming up, new offices coming up, and all those offices need restaurants to go to eat. Most of them can cook, to be realistic. So they need us to be able to feed themselves. And a lot of people are investing more into the restaurant business now. And because one thing is that COVID taught all of us to be more resilient than we have ever been before. And if we've survived last year and the year before, it gives us the confidence that there's nothing more that we cannot survive. We are strong, we are resilient. So in Western Australia, there's more hope, and a lot of people are just so much looking forward to what's going to happen. I mean, just to think about it, the border is not open yet, and we are all doing good. We are all still here. So imagine when the borders opens up and when everything opens up, there's more opportunities. A lot of people want to come here. A lot of people are happy to be here in Australia and also to visit Western Australia, the wine region and all of that. So there is more hope. And at the moment, everyone is just doing their best to keep going on and finding different ways to be positive. And there's a beautiful spirit here in Western Australia, which is the spirit of everyone being there for each other. So everyone is being there for each other. If you have a problem, fellow business owners, we're there for each other. We're supporting each other. We're doing some fundraising for each other. So together, you don't feel like you're alone. Together, it's like all together, we're trying to find a way because one person can make it, but together we all can make it. And that's the spirit of WA at the moment.
It's a great spirit because you do need each other. You do need to help each other and support each other to be that destination of multiple venues and keeping that spirit alive. And community has to be the word of 2022. I do agree with you. Over there in SA, Christopher, you've got different types of businesses with cafes and your large venues and catering and restaurants and premium dining and casual dining. How do you see the optimism there for your businesses and in general in SA?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't going to go down so much the optimism, but more looking and reviewing our business. And Jeremy and Caleb gave perspective of restaurants. I'll give one for catering. And we reviewed the marketplace, and one of the areas that we moved into is the aged care sector. I guess one of our strengths of our businesses, we like to get into to new areas and be leaders in the chosen areas. So we felt that aged care was an area where we could make influence. So we've moved into consultancy role as well as actually delivering in that sector. So we sort of reviewed our business and looked for opportunities within the marketplace because it is obviously a challenging time.
Yeah, I think the businesses that are constantly reviewing what they're doing and looking at opportunities and looking at ways to be able to maximise that are the businesses that seem to be definitely the ones that are doing quite well. Yeah. So I know that Hugo mentioned, and I think the stat was 73% of businesses are looking for staff. I'm pretty sure it's around about 99.9% right now or at the moment. So
I can only go by the survey results, I'm sorry.
It's definitely the hottest topic is about what do we do about staff. So Jeremy, I guess those challenges of you've got premium dining venues and across Byron and Brisbane and also here in New South Wales. What have you been doing and what are you doing as far as that lack of skilled staff and in your businesses?
During the first lockdown in 2020, we made quite a few changes to our opening days and opening times to streamline the offering, to reduce the number of services were open and therefore the need for staff. Since then, since reopening in July 2020, we've now then tweaked those services then to reduce covers, reduce menu offerings, increase them, wind them up, wind them down, and be far more agile in day to day of how we can manage the fluctuations in staffing. I mean, at the moment with Omicron and the level of sick leave and illness and isolation is made it, it's really compounded the problem and made it 10 times more difficult. But making those adjustments early on in the piece really gave us a lot more choice and freedom to be able to focus on those services that really delivered most to us. We've got fortunately, we have in-house recruitment. So we've doubled the size of that team. We've introduced digital platforms for them, where we do both domestic and international promotions. We really worked hard on making sure that we were present in the market in New Zealand when those borders opened up, and doing the same now overseas, as again we're expecting more and more internationals to come through.
And are you short staffed?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, we're probably on average about 35 to 40% down.
Yeah, wow.
Which equates to about 100 to 150 people.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
Now, Caleb, over there with your borders closed, I mean, I'd love to come over and see you, but I don't know when they're opening. So what's that done for you and your staff levels and team? How were you managing? What have you done?
So with me, what I did, the first thing I did is I affiliated myself with a college, a culinary college. And so in that way, sometimes I go to talk to the culinary team to motivate them as a guest speaker, and I become the face of the college. And one thing I do also is to do a cooking competition. So the best of the chefs that finish their stage 3 or whatever, or that learning about hospitality in the front house, they do a competition. The ones that finish the best comes to work with me. So that's one thing I've done. And at the moment, I'm still doing that. That helps me not to be in short of staff. At the moment, I'm even giving staff to follow businesses around me in Western Australia. And another thing I do too is also to create a good working environment. It's true, you're the business owner, you're the chef. But back in the days, I remember growing up, the chef is usually hard and mean and grumpy. But nowadays, that idea needs to change. So one of the things that I do is to treat my staff the same way I would love to be treated. So create a good working environment, make them feel appreciated. So in that way, they don't even want to leave you. Some of my team here have been with me for 2 years now. They never want to leave the same people. And apart from that, create like a family meal. So instead of trying to always look for a new team and they come, they go because they don't like the environment, you try to keep what you already have by treating them good, making them feel appreciated. And I invest more also in training. Like if you come to the restaurant every afternoon on Wednesdays, we are closed during the lunchtime. All I do is staff training. They all come dressed like they're working. There's usually no one. So I call some of my friends that are like food critics, like from Mini Magazine and all of that. They come to be like my guests. And I'm also one of the guests. I'm sitting down and the staff have to do their whole training that I've already given them after the trial. So you practice, and after some time, it becomes part of them. So they feel like they're learning a lot. And some of them have other jobs. So when they use the training they've learned from you to go to their second jobs, they feel like they're more ahead and they get more promotions. So that makes it, they don't want to leave you. because they know, one, you're paying them the right way, you're treating them good, they're like family. Their problem is your problem. Why do they want to leave? So it's like a relationship. Why do you want to leave? So if we do that, which I'm doing, it helps with my staffing. So at the moment, it reduces my problem with staffing, so I can focus on the main job, which is trying to make sure my customers are happy, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Customers are happy, food house, business is doing good, and you have less difficulty. And that is my secret so far with my staffing and customer service.
Love that secret. Oh, I've got some feedback, sorry. Christopher, so I mean, then on the scale for your venues, where you've got basically large events and catering and you've got multiple venues, how have you been managing this over the last few months and looking forward? What's your plan?
What's our plan? I guess I can only sort of reiterate what Jeremy and Caleb had said about one, streamlining your business, and two, making you the employer of choice. And I guess that's where, as a business, we've want to become the employer of choice. We give staff some clear career pathing, and we're able to move them and multi-skill them across multiple facets of our business. So really creating that career pathing. And Caleb talked of 2 years. I mean, some of our staff are approaching 10 and 12 years. With our business and been able to grow, it's about succession planning. So really becoming that employer of choice. In the catering area, when you talk large scale events, we've been caught short, and the state has been caught short of staffing. When we look at our business, our industry in South Australia, if we were to have the convention centre, the Adelaide Oval, the National Wine Centre, and ourselves all, large events on any one weekend in the festive period, the employer, the third-party staff supplies are upwards of 150 to 200 staff short. So even when we use our agency staff, we want to say that Blanco Hornet is your employer of choice, and try and get competitive even in the supply of agency staff, and really giving them and making them feel home within your business.
I think that's a really important point about the succession planning and about making the staff feel like there's a plan for them. You're part of this journey. There's a journey for you, and to make sure that they do feel connected to the venue. I think as well, when Hugo was talking about the benchmark report and takeaway, and I know your venues, and I know that they don't offer that takeaway element. It's not in that premium level of what you're offering, and takeaway isn't for everybody. However, Caleb, you did something quite interesting with takeaway alcohol. Do you want to elaborate on what you did? Because obviously when all the restaurants closed, everyone's got tons of wine on the shelves, and we lobbied hard to be able to help that. But what did you do?
So what I did, sometimes I have some wines that's usually, because normally I have to put the wines on my menu. So what I do is still the same wines. They're still the same great qualities like any other wines in my menu, but I put them on a special shelf. I can show you. I'll just move my laptop a minute just to show you, give you a view. Over there.
Retail.
A special rack, a special shelf. Just got to make people feel special at the end of the day. So these wines are my special collection. And if you want it, I can give it to you on a takeaway, and you can enjoy it at home while watching your best show or learning how to cook with me on Instagram. And most of my guests, at the end of their meal, I always go to talk to them. I'm like, hey, how was your meal? By the way, I have this special collection of wine, not on the menu, and they're all over there. I have this bottle that I love so much. And I'm sure you're gonna love that with while you're enjoying your show or while you're on a trip or whatever. And 80% of my guests normally goes for it. At the end of the day, just want to top their revenue. It doesn't have to be a crazy expensive wine. Just be something not on the menu, not easily found on any bottle shop, something unique. And you can ask your normal supplier, do you have any wine that you're not supplying to anyone in my region, anyone in my city? And they'll tell you yes. You pay some dollars for it, you get it, and you make your profit out of it. And that's what I'm doing so far. And it's working so far, and I keep doing it. So
if it's working, keep doing it. A lot of venues have actually implemented. They had thousands of dollars of wine on the shelf, and they couldn't hold on to it. They couldn't operate, so they incorporated that retail with the takeaway with the alcohol. So let's hope we can get WA over the line, and you can keep doing that, Caleb. I think when we talk about occupancy costs and cost of goods, there was a real fear last year of raising prices, of what to do on that level. Maybe I know that you've got some interesting points there, Christopher. What's your take on why potentially that has changed since last year on the benchmark report?
One of the things for me, occupancy costs, and definitely with our partners in catering, we went to a percentage of turnover model. So when you're trying to combat the restrictions, as we are currently in Adelaide through later December, January and early Feb, if we're not doing events, we're not paying occupancy costs. So one of the key structures of our business, and has been for the last 5 years, is to, rather than be caught in fixed rental arrangements, that where possible, our new modelling goes as a percentage of turnover.
Jeremy, with all your venues, what have you done over the last, I guess, few months and plans with the occupancy, particularly and cost of goods there?
The occupancies, the government's been, obviously putting out very supportive packages to support both landlords and tenants. We've been able to utilise those. Not with every landlord, but in particular with our government landlords, they've been extremely supportive, and that's flowed through essentially to the bottom line. General cost of goods, I mean, we're watching every single dollar at the moment and more than ever. So I think that the general costs, we sort of stripped out anything that's really unnecessary and really just being super careful.
And those businesses that have increased their prices on the menu, do you feel that consumers have pushed back? Do you feel that there is a fear there? What's your take on it? Put it out to anybody.
We've had to increase prices, as everyone has, and we've had very little resistance to that. I think that there is obviously a ceiling, and we're not being greedy, but we're definitely being cautiously increasing those prices where we can to compensate, especially for the big increases in wages.
Yeah. So I guess if you had a wish list that you'd like government to implement in your business to make life easier, what would go on your wish list? Caleb, have you got anything to go on a wish list?
On the wish list, I feel like if the government can just make it show that they support the restaurant more, and that would be great, because at the moment, like West Lampert, I follow him on Facebook and on the social media, see how hard he's fighting every day. And sometimes I even send him a message to congratulate him on how hard he's fighting, like the last win. So if the government can show more transparency in assisting the restaurants and realizing that at the end of the day, without the restaurants and the hospitality industry, that's the economy will be going down. So all of us make up the beautiful economy that we all enjoy. So if the government can do that, that would be great. And also to reduce the red tape so it's easier for new restaurants and new businesses to start up, also to make it easy for everyone.
Excellent. Wes, can you just have a look at those question and answers just while we go around on the wish list, so that some of them are quite long? Can you give me a hand and have a little read of those? And I'll come to you in a second, Wes. And Jeremy, what would go on your wish list?
There was often, when the government talked of their support packages, they talked of reasonable recovery periods, and that was never defined. Now, I think that we've always been in the pandemic, and the reasonable recovery is probably going to be, years as opposed to months. So having some clarity around that, and having some clarity around what that ongoing support's going to be as we rebuild would be very useful, because trying to plan now for 2022-23, not really knowing where some of those costs are going to land is quite difficult, and will mean essentially quite increased prices again.
Yeah, I think it's challenging, without that clarity and understanding and that crystal ball, it's really hard to make a plan anywhere from the next 2 months, 6 months, 12 months. I know that businesses, it's really important to make that plan, and it's very, very hard to be able to at this point make that plan. Christopher, do you have any wish list items?
I guess for me is that the government not to use the hospitality industry as their easy, quick fix solution to this pandemic, greater minds than mine to come together to look at other ways and a more even spread across industries to help with the pandemic, and then not just target the hospitality industry as one of their solutions.
Thank you. And Wes, were there any things there in the question and answers there that we need to chat about?
So there's really two questions. Cheryl has two questions that are really one, and then Angie has a question. So Cheryl speaks about businesses, a comment that we made about businesses having no structured training programs in place, that lots of hospitality businesses, and wondering how we can partner with RTOs in order to deliver training and also get more trainees and apprentices into the workforce using current government financial incentives. And so that goes back to a bit about what I said earlier, that while most reports will show that starts for traineeships and apprenticeships in all industries did increase from previous years, the problem is that with food, the completion rate is dismal. So the completion rate at present is about 31%. So only 1 in 3 youth that start into a traineeship or apprenticeship in food at any age will complete. And so that's lagging tremendously behind other industries. Look, we all work in hospitality or have worked in hospitality in the past. And we know that it is certainly a robust industry. It certainly takes a lot of dedication and determination. It isn't the same as sitting behind a desk, but certainly is very rewarding. We need new hospitality heroes. We need to change the narrative. We've really been listening to oppositions, and I'll use the word opposition in a nice way, around the country, demonizing hospitality. They've been saying that hospitality is unsociable hours. Well, it's only unsociable to people that like to work 9 to 5. You can't say that it's unsociable to someone who likes working those shifts and enjoys the time that they work. So just blanketly saying that really demonizes it and makes people think, oh, well, I don't want to get into that because it's got negative connotations. Also, 100% of restaurants, cafes, and caterers are not wage thieves. In fact, that percentage is much smaller. We collaborate and work very closely with the Fair Work Ombudsman, and she tells us all the time that she only targets businesses that she knows, because of complaints or data matching with the ATO, are chronic underpayers. And so when you constantly get negative feedback from certain organizations that hospitality are all wage thieves, it certainly drives the youth away from the industry. So it's just really important that, it took 11 years since the Fair Work Act came out for this reputation and for these percentages to be where they are. We need to draw a line in the sand, and we need to turn the narrative on hospitality. There's no better time to get into the industry. All those menu price increases were to cover not only food and beverage increases, but also wage increases. I'm sure all of you can attest to the fact that even your junior positions are paying very well, and much better than someone who graduates with a university degree to just sit behind a desk in their first job, and certainly have rewarding career potential. And there's lots of courses, both online and through Vet and TAFE, that you can take to stay in the industry. And finally, restaurant and catering is an RTO. And in New South Wales, through the Smart and Skilled program, we partner with businesses to provide training to their staff, multiple certifications. And around the country, we partner with other RTOs, and one in South Australia that we recently went to the graduation of and gave the speech. So we certainly are very well connected in terms of getting people trained up. And we also have a training academy to offer short courses and micro-credentials at a very reasonable price. And some of them are subsidized by the states. So it's super important to log into the website and do that. That's all I'll say about training and education. There's a question from Angie about that Melbourne's been the hardest hit. How do we increase foot traffic in the city? And how do we look after the next generation where they haven't learned very much in the past 2 years? Well, ultimately, the Melbourne City Council is committed to spend that $100 million that they allocated a couple of years ago on those type of things to get people back into the CBD. The main problem is that after 2 years of COVID and expecting that COVID's going to be with us probably in some form for all of 2022 and potentially 2023, a lot of corporates have permanently gone to a hybrid structure. And so once you do that, it's probably not going to be the same footfall from corporates that it was before. There'll be peak days when it's very busy and there'll be other days when it's quiet. And we don't expect that until tourists return and until the borders are open fully to all countries, which hopefully will be sometime in 2022, that footfall will return to normal. The next question is about close contacts. Hugo, I'll throw that one over to you.
How to look at that one, Hugo?
So is that in the Q&A or is that in the
Q&A?
Q&A. So if one person, first of all, we need to know what state's Karen in, because there's different rules in different states for close contacts. But if one state member tests positive, all remaining staff becomes close contacts.
It's national now. It's 7 days at home if you're close contact at home. I think WA still has slightly stricter, but I believe that all the states have come in line to that 7 days if you're close contact at home.
Yeah, WA is a bit different, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's really if you're a household contact that really goes to that, unless you're in WA, which is still figuring out what they're going to do. And I think that basically the rule should just be speak to your local health authority to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And I think that, speak to them probably gives the best guidance. They're not always the best to get in touch with because they're a little slow sometimes. They just never get back to you. But I think that's probably your first port of call. But what I will say is ultimately the rules around close contacts and casual contacts have pretty much been standardized across the country. And that's basically either you're a household contact, so if someone you live with has COVID, you're a close contact, or if you've been face-to-face with them for more than 4 hours, like a household-like contact. So that's really when you'd have those problems.
I still think it's really important as a business to make a plan. It's really important to be proactive and have that plan already made now, so that if it does happen, that you're ahead of the game. And I think you were in SA. I know SA, we're getting a lot of questions from SA and WA at the moment because you're kind of a little bit behind where the East Coast was. But it's really important for your staff and for yourself to be able to have that plan now set, and so that you can just slot into that. Everyone's comfortable, if the staff know what to do, you all know, and you have that plan. And I missed the person's name on the question's just gone, but absolutely, it's not a one shoe fits all in our industry. It's a two-speed economy, and it's that way through every single state. And it's really hard. It's really tough. We've got businesses doing very, very well and others doing really poorly. So when we are trying to find solutions, it is trying to find that balance to help the majority and really help find that support to help you be able to sustain and to move forward. Did you have something you wanted to add there, Wes?
Just more, we talk about this. We've been talking about this through the entire pandemic. You need to, and this is, I'm being a realist, you need to plan for the worst and hope for the best, meaning that we do expect that 2022 will be COVID affected. And certainly the movement of people is going to be affected in the first quarter. But as has been reported, we expect that from Easter, so early April and on, that the country will begin to go back to normal. That's daily case numbers around the same as they were in mid-December. We can't tell you what the future holds, but for the most part, as a national economy, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates, we certainly have a growing economy, and there are lots of green shoots. Today, even the savings rate was announced. There's $454 billion in people's savings account. So they want to spend, they want to get out there, and they want to come in and patronize your businesses. Certainly, as consumer confidence improves, as case numbers go down every single day. I think today was in the 30,000s around the country, which is quite a drop from previous days, half of mid last week. And if that continues, then certainly customer confidence will improve, and we can hopefully see those brighter days ahead for the rest of the year.
And to put that spin of positivity on, I know that I've just come back from Melbourne, and Melbourne, you have such a beautiful city. On the nights, there was a lot of people around. There was a real hum. There's that you had the tennis. You've been doing an amazing job. You've got a beautiful city, and I can tell it's coming back. So you've done a great job to get through to where you are now. So well done. Well, thank you everyone for participating today, and thank you so much to Jeremy, Christopher and Caleb for joining us today, and also to Hugo and Wes. Of course, our details are always available. Call Restaurant and Catering anytime if you'd like to chat to us and make any, let us help you and support you in anything that you might need. And we want to thank our 3 amazing panelists today to joined us to answer those questions. So everybody have a great Monday, and if you need a copy of the benchmark report, please let us know, and that can be posted out to you, or of course it's a download on the website as well. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks, folks.